Celestia Academy wasn't like schools on Earth or most other planets. It didn't sit on solid ground with grass and trees around it. Instead, it floated in the darkness of space, a massive station built in neutral territory where no single species claimed ownership. The station was enormous, large enough to house thousands of students and staff, with corridors that stretched for miles and observation decks that looked out onto stars and distant nebulas. The students who attended Celestia Academy came from everywhere. Literally everywhere. Dozens of different species walked its halls. There were the tall, crystalline Valix who communicated through light patterns. The stocky Theron with their multiple arms and deep rumbling voices. The floating Aerith whose bodies were made of contained energy. Humans, still relatively new to the galactic community, made up a small percentage of the student body. And many others, each species bringing their own languages, customs, and ways of seeing the universe. The Academy's motto was carved in a dozen different languages above the main entrance: unity through understanding. It sounded noble. Idealistic. The kind of thing that looked good on promotional materials and made parents feel good about sending their children across the galaxy to attend. But the reality inside those gleaming corridors was far from the ideal the motto promised. Like any school anywhere in the universe, Celestia Academy had its social hierarchies. Its popular kids and outcasts. Its bullies and victims. The species might be different, but the teenage tendency toward cruelty remained remarkably consistent across the stars. Lyra walked through those corridors every day with her head down, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. It was a difficult task given what she was. She was Lumini. And the Lumini were known across the galaxy as the Beautiful Ones. Her species had evolved on a planet with long periods of darkness. Over millions of years, they developed bioluminescent skin as a way to communicate and attract mates. Their skin glowed softly, constantly, in patterns that shifted with their emotions. Happy Lumini glowed in warm golds and soft pinks. Sad ones dimmed to blues and purples. Angry ones flashed hot reds and oranges. It was impossible for a Lumini to hide their feelings. Their emotions literally lit up their skin for everyone to see. Beyond the glow, Lumini had features that most species in the galaxy found aesthetically pleasing. Symmetrical faces. Large expressive eyes. Graceful movements. Their entire culture had developed around the concept of beauty. Art. Music. Dance. Physical perfection. These weren't just hobbies for the Lumini. They were central values. Core beliefs. A Lumini who wasn't beautiful was considered fundamentally flawed in ways that went beyond mere appearance. Lyra had been beautiful once. She'd had the same perfect features as the rest of her species. Her skin had glowed in stunning patterns. People had stopped to look at her when she walked by. Not in the uncomfortable way of staring at something wrong, but in appreciation of something lovely. That was before the scars. Now, the left side of Lyra's face was covered in deep, jagged lines. They ran from her temple down across her cheek to her jaw. More scars marked her neck. The tissue had healed, but not smoothly. The scars were raised and rough, disrupting the natural flow of her features. Worse, they disrupted her glow. The left side of her face barely lit up anymore. The bioluminescence that should have flowed smoothly across her skin stuttered and dimmed where the scars cut through. When she felt strong emotions, her face glowed unevenly. The right side would light up normally while the left remained dark and damaged. She'd gotten the scars 3 years ago. Her family had been traveling on a commercial transport when raiders attacked. Space pirates looking for cargo or ransom or both. The ship's security tried to fight them off but failed. The raiders breached the passenger section. Lyra had been 14. Her younger brother Finn had been 9. When the raiders burst into their cabin, Finn had frozen in terror. One of the raiders had pulled out a blade. Not an energy weapon. An actual physical knife. Probably because he enjoyed using it more. Lyra didn't think. Didn't hesitate. She threw herself in front of her brother. The blade hit her instead of him. Then hit her again. And again. She remembered the pain. The heat of her own blood. Her mother screaming. The chaos. Station security arrived before the raiders could finish what they'd started. The passengers were rescued. Lyra survived. So did Finn, without a scratch on him. But Lyra carried the marks from that day. The scars that Lumini medical technology, despite being advanced in many ways, couldn't fully repair. The damage went too deep. Affected the light-producing cells in her skin. They could make the wounds close and heal, but they couldn't restore what had been destroyed. Her parents had tried everything. Different doctors. Different treatments. Experimental procedures. Nothing worked. Eventually, they'd given up trying to fix her and started trying to hide her instead. That's when they'd sent her to Celestia Academy. Far from the Lumini homeworld. Far from the community that would judge their family for having a damaged daughter. Out of sight. Out of mind. They paid her tuition and made sure she had what she needed, but they rarely visited. Rarely called. It was easier for everyone if she just stayed away. At Celestia Academy, Lyra discovered that distance didn't protect her from judgment. It just meant she faced it alone. Other Lumini students attended the academy. Children of diplomats and wealthy traders like herself. They should have been her natural friend group. Her people. But they were the cruelest of all. They whispered broken when she passed in the hallways. Called her defective in their own language, sometimes not even bothering to lower their voices. They asked questions loud enough for everyone to hear. Why doesn't she just wear a mask? Can't they fix that? Why would her parents send her here where everyone has to look at her? The judgment from her own species hurt worse than anything the other students could say. Other species didn't fully understand Lumini culture. Didn't grasp how deeply appearance mattered to her people. But other Lumini knew exactly what the scars meant. Knew exactly how far Lyra had fallen from acceptable standards. Even students from other species avoided her, though for different reasons. Association mattered at Celestia Academy like it did at schools everywhere. Befriending the outcast meant risking becoming an outcast yourself. Better to stay away. Stay safe in the middle of the social hierarchy. So Lyra ate lunch alone every single day. She'd find a table in the far corner of the massive cafeteria. Put her food tray down. Pull out her tablet and pretend to study while she ate. Sometimes she actually studied. Often she just stared at the screen unseeing, counting the minutes until lunch period ended and she could leave. In classes, she sat alone. Teachers had tried assigning group projects at the beginning of the year. Her assigned partners had complained until the teachers let them work with others. Now the teachers just let Lyra work alone. It was easier that way. She walked through the corridors with her head down and her hair falling forward to partially hide her face. She'd learned to move quickly. To take routes that were less crowded. To time her movements so she'd encounter fewer people. She'd become an expert at making herself small. Invisible. Forgettable. The only place Lyra excelled was academically. She poured herself into her studies with an intensity that her teachers praised but her classmates mocked. She was at the top of her class in quantum mechanics, xenobiology, and comparative literature. Perfect scores on almost every test. Homework always completed early and thoroughly. Of course she studies, she'd heard someone say once. What else does she have to do? No friends. No life. Just her and her books. The comment had hurt because it was true. But Lyra kept studying anyway. Academic achievement was the only value she had left. The only thing that made her feel like she wasn't completely worthless. The worst of her tormentors was a Lumini girl named Vera. She was everything Lyra used to be and could never be again. Perfect glowing skin that shifted through beautiful patterns. Symmetrical features. Graceful movements. She came from an incredibly wealthy family. Wore expensive clothes. Had a large friend group that followed her everywhere. And she'd made it her personal mission to remind Lyra daily that she didn't belong. Vera's cruelty was creative. Sometimes it was verbal. Loud comments about damaged goods and genetic failures. Sometimes it was social. Deliberately organizing events and making sure Lyra knew she wasn't invited. Sometimes it was technological. Altered photos of Lyra circulated on social media with mocking captions. Lyra endured it all because what choice did she have? She couldn't go home. Her parents had made it clear she was better off here. She couldn't transfer schools. This was one of the few schools that accepted multiple species, and her family had paid tuition years in advance. She was stuck. Trapped in a place where everyone reminded her daily that she was broken. But there were 3 students at Celestia Academy who didn't seem to care about the social hierarchies or the usual rules of teenage cruelty. 3 students who were considered outsiders themselves for different reasons. The humans. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community. Only a few decades since first contact. Still figuring out their place among species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. They were considered interesting but unsophisticated. Enthusiastic but naive. Their technology was primitive compared to most species. Their understanding of galactic politics was limited. But they were friendly. Open. Curious about everyone and everything. And they seemed to view social situations through a completely different lens than the other species at the academy. One of the human students was a boy named Ryan. Quiet. Observant. He kept to himself mostly, though he was always polite when people approached him. He had brown hair that never seemed to lay quite flat. Wore comfortable clothes instead of fashionable ones. Sat in the back of classes and took notes on an old-fashioned paper notebook instead of a tablet. Ryan had noticed Lyra. Had seen how she was treated. And it bothered him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. There was something wrong about watching someone be torn down daily while everyone else just accepted it as normal. He didn't know how to fix it. Didn't know if he even should get involved. Interfering might just make things worse for her. But one day, everything changed. During a mandatory school assembly in the main auditorium, Vera orchestrated her cruelest prank yet. Ryan searched the station for over an hour. Celestia Academy was huge, with hundreds of corridors, dozens of levels, and countless places someone could hide if they really wanted to disappear. He checked the library first, thinking maybe she'd gone somewhere familiar. Empty. Then the cafeteria, the study halls, the recreation areas. Nothing. He was starting to think maybe she'd gone back to her dormitory when he remembered the observation decks. There were several scattered throughout the station, small areas with transparent walls that looked out into space. Most students avoided them because staring into endless darkness made them uncomfortable. But maybe that's exactly where someone would go if they wanted to be alone. Ryan found her on observation deck 7, the smallest and least visited one. The deck was barely larger than a closet, with a curved transparent wall that offered a view of distant stars and the slow rotation of a nearby planet. The lighting was dim, just enough to see by without interfering with the view outside. Lyra sat on the floor with her back pressed against the solid interior wall. Her knees were pulled up to her chest. Her arms wrapped around her legs. Her face was hidden, buried against her knees. Her distinctive glow, which should have illuminated her even in the dim lighting, was almost completely dark. Just the faintest flicker of deep blue, the color of profound sadness among her species. Ryan stood in the doorway for a moment, suddenly uncertain. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she wanted to be alone. Maybe his presence would make things worse. But he'd come this far. And someone needed to acknowledge what had happened to her. Someone needed to tell her that what Vera did was cruel and wrong and not something she deserved. Ryan walked into the observation deck and sat down on the floor about 6 feet away from Lyra. Not too close. Just close enough to be present. He didn't say anything at first. Didn't try to force conversation. Just sat there in quiet solidarity, looking out at the stars. Several minutes passed. The silence was broken only by the soft hum of the station's life support systems and the occasional muffled sound of footsteps from the corridor outside. Finally, Lyra lifted her head slightly. Noticed him sitting there. Her eyes were swollen from crying. The glow on her face flickered weakly, unevenly, the scarred side staying dark while the undamaged side pulsed with that deep blue of sadness. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was rough from crying. "Checking on you," Ryan said simply. Lyra's expression hardened. She started to stand up. Don't pity me. I get enough of that from teachers who look at me like I'm some tragic case. I don't need it from you too." "I'm not here to pity you," Ryan said, staying seated. "I'm here because what happened back there was wrong. Cruel. And someone should say that to you directly instead of just thinking it and moving on." Lyra paused halfway through standing. Stared at him like she was trying to figure out if he was being genuine or if this was some new form of mockery she hadn't encountered yet. "You're human," she said, like she was just now registering that fact. "Ryan," he said. "Junior year. We have advanced physics together. I sit 3 rows behind you. I know who you are." Lyra slowly sat back down, though she didn't relax. Stayed tense. Ready to bolt if this conversation went somewhere she didn't want. "Everyone knows the humans. You're the new curiosity. The primitive species that somehow developed faster than light travel without understanding half the science behind it." Ryan shrugged. "That's pretty accurate actually. We got really lucky with some discoveries and made wild guesses that happened to work." He paused. "But that's not what we're here to talk about." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, like she was testing to see if he was really going to listen or if he'd get bored and leave, she started talking. She told him about the attack. About being 14 years old on a transport ship with her family. About the raiders breaking through security and storming the passenger sections. About the man with the knife. About her little brother's terrified face. About the split-second decision to throw herself between the blade and fin. "I don't remember thinking about it," Lyra said, her voice distant. "I just moved. 1 second I was sitting in my seat. The next I was on the floor and there was so much pain and blood and my mother was screaming." Ryan listened without interrupting. Didn't try to fill the silence with meaningless platitudes. Just let her talk. Lyra touched the scars on her face unconsciously. They told me I was brave. The security officers who finally stopped the raiders. The doctors who treated me. My parents, at first. Everyone said I was a hero for protecting Finn. Her laugh was bitter. But being brave didn't matter once we got home. Once the initial crisis was over and the reality set in that the scars weren't going to fade. She explained how Lumini culture worked. How physical beauty wasn't just valued, it was central to their entire identity as a species. How art and aesthetics governed everything from career choices to social standing. How someone who was damaged, imperfect, flawed, they didn't have a place in that society. My parents tried to fix me, Lyra said. They took me to the best doctors. Tried experimental treatments. Spent a fortune on procedures that did nothing. Eventually they realized I was going to stay like this. Scarred. Broken. An embarrassment to the family. So they sent you here, Ryan said quietly. So they sent me here, Lyra confirmed. Far away from anyone who knew me before. Far away from their friends and social circles. Out of sight, out of mind. She gestured vaguely around the observation deck. And I thought maybe it would be better here. Maybe at a school with dozens of different species, where everyone was different from everyone else, my scars wouldn't matter as much. But the other Lumini students made sure they mattered, Ryan finished. Lyra nodded. Especially Vera. She's exactly what I used to be. Perfect skin. Perfect features. Perfect family. Everything a Lumini is supposed to be. And I think seeing me reminds everyone what happens when perfection breaks. I'm a warning. A cautionary tale. Better to reject me completely than risk any association with failure. They sat in silence for a while. Ryan processed everything she told him. The attack. The scars. The rejection by her own people. 3 years of daily mockery and isolation. And through it all, she kept coming to school. Kept studying. Kept trying to exist in a place that clearly didn't want her. That's incredibly messed up, Ryan finally said. Lyra looked at him in surprise. What? Your people. The way they treat scars. The way they treated you. Ryan shook his head. You saved your brother's life. You're literally a hero. And they rejected you for it because the evidence of what you did doesn't fit their aesthetic standards? That's insane. That's Lumini culture, Lyra said, like she was defending it despite being a victim of it. Then your culture is wrong, Ryan said bluntly. Lyra blinked. Nobody had ever said that to her before. People had expressed sympathy. Had said how sad or unfortunate her situation was. But nobody had ever directly challenged the fundamental beliefs that had led to her ostracism. Where I come from, Ryan continued, scars are different. We don't hide them or see them as flaws. We see them as proof that you survived something that tried to destroy you. As evidence of strength. As part of your story. He leaned back against the wall, looking out at the stars. There's this Japanese tradition called kintsugi. When a ceramic bowl or cup breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the cracks, they repair it with gold. The repairs become part of the object's beauty. The breaking and healing become part of its story. He looked at Lyra. Maybe scars work the same way. Not flaws to hide. Just part of who you are now. Part of what you survived. Lyra stared at him. Her glow was slowly returning, shifting from that deep blue to something lighter. Confused but no longer quite so sad. That's a very human way of looking at it. Maybe, Ryan admitted. But that doesn't make it wrong. Your people value physical perfection. Humans value survival. Resilience. The ability to keep going even when things are hard. Those scars on your face? They mean you're tougher than most people will ever have to be. That's worth something. Not to the people here, Lyra said quietly. Not to some people here, Ryan corrected. But not everyone. You've just been surrounded by the wrong people. The ones who care more about surfaces than substance. Lyra didn't know what to say to that. For 3 years, she'd accepted that her scars made her less valuable. That she deserved the isolation and mockery. That her worth as a person had been permanently diminished by the attack. Having someone challenge that belief so directly was disorienting. Why do you care? Lyra asked. You don't know me. We've never even talked before today. Why track me down and sit here listening to me complain? Ryan considered the question. Because what happened to you today was cruel. And I guess I'm tired of watching people be cruel and doing nothing about it. He met her eyes. And because maybe humans see things differently than other species. Maybe that's not always a bad thing. They talked for another hour. About Earth, which Lyra knew almost nothing about. About Lumini culture, which Ryan found fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. About Celestia Academy and the strange social dynamics of a school where dozens of species tried to coexist. When they finally left the observation deck, Lyra's glow was back to its normal brightness. Still uneven because of the scars, but no longer that deep sad blue. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt like maybe she'd made a friend. A human friend who saw scars as stories instead of flaws. Who valued courage over perfection. Who thought her culture's beauty standards were ridiculous. It was strange. Unexpected. But walking back through the corridors beside Ryan, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The day after their conversation on the observation deck, Ryan did something that surprised everyone, including Lyra. When lunch period came, he walked straight to her isolated corner table and sat down across from her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Lyra had frozen mid-bite, staring at him in confusion. "What are you doing?" "Eating lunch," Ryan said, pulling out his food. "You eat lunch. I eat lunch. Seems logical to eat lunch together." "People will talk," Lyra warned. "People always talk," Ryan replied. "Might as well give them something interesting to talk about." And just like that, Lyra's isolated corner table became a little less isolated. Within a week, Ryan's 2 human friends joined them. Jake was tall and lanky with an easy smile and a tendency to joke about everything. Nicole was sharp and observant with dark hair she kept in a practical braid and a no-nonsense attitude that made people think twice before messing with her. They treated Lyra like they treated each other. No special consideration for her scars. No walking on eggshells around her feelings. They just included her in conversations naturally. Asked her opinions. Joked with her. Argued with her about homework and politics and whether the cafeteria's attempt at pizza was an insult to Italian cuisine or just garden variety terrible. "It's definitely an insult," Jake insisted during one lunch. "My grandmother would weep if she saw what they're calling pizza." "Your grandmother is Italian?" Lyra asked. "Italian-American," Jake corrected. "Which means she's even more intense about food than Italians in Italy. It's like the passion concentrated when they emigrated." "I don't even know what Italian means," Lyra admitted. "Or American. Earth geography is confusing." "Everything about Earth is confusing," Nicole said. "We've got like 200 countries and they all hate each other but also somehow work together. It doesn't make sense even to us." These conversations were normal. Easy. For the first time in 3 years, Lyra sat at lunch and actually enjoyed herself. She laughed. Made jokes of her own. Forgot to be self-conscious about her scars or her uneven glow. The other students noticed. Some ignored it. Others whispered. Vera and her group made pointed comments about charity cases and desperate humans who'll befriend anyone. But Ryan and his friends didn't react. They just kept including Lyra like her presence was exactly where she belonged. Study sessions became a regular thing. Ryan struggled with quantum mechanics, which came naturally to Lyra. She struggled with human literature and history, which Ryan found easy. They started meeting in the library after classes to help each other. "I don't understand this poem," Lyra complained one afternoon, staring at her tablet. "It's about a road? 2 roads? Why does it matter which road you take?" "It's a metaphor," Ryan explained. "The roads represent choices. Life decisions. The poem is about how the choices we make define who we become." "That seems obvious," Lyra said. "Why write a whole poem about it?" "Because humans like to make simple things complicated," Ryan grinned. "It's kind of our specialty." Lyra helped Ryan understand wave functions and probability fields. Ryan helped Lyra understand Shakespeare and the American Civil War. They made a good team. Complemented each other's strengths and weaknesses. But it was more than just academics. They discovered they had similar interests beyond school. They both liked old science fiction stories. They both found certain types of music calming. They both thought too much about philosophical questions that had no clear answers. They had similar senses of humor too. Dry. A little sarcastic. Jake called it nerd humor, but they both found each other genuinely funny in ways that surprised them. One day, about a month into their friendship, Ryan showed up to their study session with his sketchbook. Lyra had seen him drawing during downtime but had never asked to see his work. It felt too personal. Too intrusive. But Ryan brought it up himself. "Can I show you something?" "Sure," Lyra said, curious. Ryan flipped open his sketchbook. It was filled with drawings done in pencil and charcoal. Sketches of the station's corridors. The view from various observation decks. Other students sitting in the cafeteria or walking to class. Some were quick studies, just a few lines capturing movement or expression. Others were detailed, carefully rendered with shading and texture. They were good. Really good. Lyra didn't know much about human art standards, but even she could see the skill in the way Ryan captured light and shadow, the way he made two-dimensional drawings feel three-dimensional. These are beautiful, Lyra said honestly. Thanks, Ryan said. He seemed nervous for some reason. There's something else though. Some drawings I did recently. I wanted to show you. Get your permission before I kept working on them. He flipped to a section near the back of the sketchbook. And Lyra's breath caught. They were drawings of her. Several of them. From different angles. In different settings. One showed her sitting in the library, head bent over a book, her glow illuminating the pages. Another showed her walking through a corridor, books clutched to her chest. A third was a close-up of her face, looking off to the side like she was watching something in the distance. But what struck Lyra most wasn't just that Ryan had drawn her. It was how he'd drawn her. The scars were there. Ryan hadn't hidden them or minimized them. He'd rendered them with the same careful attention he gave to everything else. The jagged lines down her cheek. The raised tissue on her neck. The way the scars disrupted her natural glow, creating patterns of light and shadow across her face. But in these drawings, the scars weren't flaws. They weren't damage that detracted from the image. They were just part of her face. Part of her. And the way Ryan had drawn her, with that careful attention to light and shadow, with the focus on her expression and posture rather than perfect features. She looked interesting. Complex. There was character in that scarred face. Story. Depth. She looked beautiful. Not beautiful despite the scars. Beautiful including them. The scars were part of what made the drawings compelling. Part of what made the person in them worth looking at. Lyra stared at the drawings for a long time without speaking. Her glow shifted through several colors. Confusion. Surprise. Something that might have been joy but felt too big to name. I hope this is okay, Ryan said into the silence. His nervousness was more obvious now. I should have asked before I drew you. You have an interesting face. Good bone structure. The way your glow creates light and shadow, it's fascinating from an artistic perspective. But if this makes you uncomfortable, I can stop. Or tear these out. Whatever you want. No, Lyra said quickly. Her voice came out rougher than she intended. Don't stop. Don't tear them out. She looked up at him, and Ryan was startled to see tears forming in her eyes. Can I ask you something? Of course. When you look at me, Lyra said slowly, do you see the scars first? Or do you see me first? Ryan considered the question seriously. I see you first. The scars are part of you, so I see them too. But they're not the first thing. Not the main thing. They're just one part of the whole picture. That's not how most people see me, Lyra whispered. Most people see the scars and nothing else. The scars are all I am to them. Proof that I'm damaged. Broken. Less than I should be. Then most people are looking wrong, Ryan said simply. Lyra laughed, but it came out more like a sob. You keep saying things like that. Like it's so simple. Like my entire species' cultural values are just wrong and it's obvious. Maybe they are wrong, Ryan said. At least about this. Scars mean you survived something. They mean you're tougher than the thing that tried to hurt you. That's not damage. That's proof of strength. I've never seen myself that way, Lyra admitted. She looked back down at the drawings. At the face Ryan had rendered with such care. I've spent 3 years trying to hide. Trying to be invisible. Trying to make people forget about the scars so they might see something else. Anything else. She traced one finger along the edge of the sketchbook page, not quite touching the drawing. But in these, you didn't hide them. You made them part of the picture. Part of who I am. And somehow that doesn't look broken. It looks like someone with a story. Everyone has a story, Ryan said. Yours is just more visible than most. They sat in silence for a moment. The library hummed quietly around them. Other students worked at distant tables. The station systems maintained their constant background noise. Thank you, Lyra finally said. For seeing me. Actually seeing me, not just the scars. I didn't realize how much I needed someone to do that. You don't have to thank me for that, Ryan said. That's just basic human decency. Or it should be. It's not basic here, Lyra said quietly. You have no idea how rare it is. Over the following weeks, Ryan, Jake, and Nicole became more than just lunch companions. They became actual friends. The kind Lyra hadn't had since before the attack. They made plans outside of school hours. Watched movies together in the station's recreation areas. Explored different sections of the station just for something to do. Nicole taught Lyra about Earth fashion and helped her pick clothes that were beautiful but didn't hide her scars. Own them, Nicole said firmly. They're part of you. Stop trying to minimize yourself. Jake made Lyra laugh with increasingly absurd jokes and stories about growing up on Earth. We had this thing called gym class, he explained once. Where they made you run in circles and climb ropes for no reason except to prove you could. It was torture disguised as education. And Ryan kept drawing. Kept showing Lyra how he saw the world. How he saw her. Each sketch was a reminder that someone looked at her and saw a whole person. Not just scars. Not just damage. Just Lyra. For the first time in 3 years, she stopped spending every moment being lonely. Stopped defining herself by what she'd lost. Started remembering what she still had. She had friends. Real friends who chose to spend time with her because they enjoyed her company. Who valued her thoughts and opinions. Who saw her as an equal rather than a charity case or an outcast. It didn't fix everything. Vera still made cruel comments. Other Lumini still avoided her. The stares and whispers continued. But they mattered less now. Hurt less. Because she had people in her corner. People who reminded her daily that their opinions weren't universal truth. Lyra started walking through the hallways with her head up instead of down. Started sitting in the front of classes instead of the back. Started speaking up more in group discussions. She was still scarred. That would never change. But she was beginning to understand what Ryan had tried to tell her that first day on the observation deck. The scars were part of her story. Not the end of it. Just a chapter. A difficult chapter, yes. A painful one. But not the only one. And maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over yet. Vera's face flushed with anger, her perfect glow shifting to hot reds and oranges that pulsed visibly across her skin. She wasn't used to being challenged. Wasn't used to anyone, especially not a human, standing up to her in front of a crowd. For 3 years she'd been the undisputed queen of the social hierarchy at Celestia Academy. Her word was law. Her judgments were final. And now this human boy was questioning her right in the middle of the Unity Festival with hundreds of students watching. You're defending her because you feel sorry for her, Vera said, her voice climbing higher. Because primitive humans don't understand our standards. Don't know any better. She turned to address the gathered crowd, playing to her audience like she always did. Everyone here knows the truth. She's damaged. Broken. Unworthy of being Lumini. Unworthy of being here at all. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some students nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. A few from non-Lumini species exchanged glances, clearly thinking this was all ridiculous but not willing to get involved. Ryan took a step forward. His voice was calm but carried clearly across the space. You're right that I'm human. And maybe we do things differently than you do. But where I come from, we honor scars. We recognize that surviving trauma takes real strength. That protecting others, especially at cost to yourself, takes courage. That actual beauty isn't about perfect skin or meeting some arbitrary aesthetic standard. He gestured toward Lyra without looking away from Vera. She got those scars saving her brother's life. She put herself between him and an attacker with a knife. Most people would freeze. Most people would run. She didn't. She acted. And she's carried the evidence of that choice ever since. His voice got firmer. Those scars don't make her damaged. They make her a hero. The only broken thing here is a culture that can't see the difference. The crowd shifted. Some students were nodding now. Others looked thoughtful. The absolute certainty of Vera's position was cracking, and she could feel it. Her perfectly controlled social dominance was being questioned in public. The fear that creates was visible in how her glow stuttered, flickering between anger and something that might have been panic. She did what bullies do when they feel cornered. She doubled down. Escalated. Went for the cruelest option she could think of. Fine, Vera said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. If you really believe that. If you truly think she's so worthy, so desirable despite her obvious flaws, then prove it. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Show everyone here that you actually see her as attractive. Not as a charity case. Not as someone to pity. Kiss her. Right now. In front of everyone. The crowd went completely silent. Every phone and recording device in the area was already out, capturing everything. This was drama. This was entertainment. This was the kind of moment that would be replayed and discussed for months. It was meant to be a trap. A cruel, perfect trap. Either Ryan would refuse, proving that he actually did find Lyra's scars repulsive and that all his noble words were just empty virtue signaling. Or he'd force himself to kiss her out of obligation or pity, which would be even more humiliating for Lyra. Either way, Vera won. Either way, Lyra would be publicly humiliated again. Either way, the social order would be restored with Vera firmly on top. The calculation was visible in Vera's eyes. The confidence that she just checkmated them both. Lyra's glow dimmed immediately to that deep blue of extreme distress. This was her nightmare. Being the center of attention. Being judged. Being used as a tool in someone else's power play. She reached for Ryan's arm, her hand shaking. "Don't," she said quietly, but her voice carried in the silence. "You don't have to do this. You don't owe me anything. Let's just leave. Please." The fear in her voice was real. Raw. She was seconds away from running again. From hiding again. From going back to that dark place where she'd spent 3 years believing she deserved the cruelty. Ryan looked at Lyra. Really looked at her. At her scared eyes. At the way her glow was dimming toward darkness. At the way her shoulders were hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. At the evidence of 3 years of daily cruelty that had taught her to expect the worst from everyone. Then he looked at Vera. At her triumphant expression. At the calculated cruelty in her eyes. At the certainty that she'd just won. And Ryan made a choice. Not because Vera demanded it. Not to prove anything to the crowd. But because Lyra deserved better than spending another moment believing she wasn't worthy of basic affection and respect. "Lyra," Ryan said softly, stepping closer to her. Speaking just to her now, ignoring Vera and the crowd and all the phones recording. "I'm going to do something. If you want me to stop at any point, just say so. But I need you to understand something first." Lyra looked up at him, confused and scared and hopeful all at once. Her glow flickered with the conflicting emotions. "I'm not doing this to prove anything to them," Ryan continued, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not doing this because Vera demanded it or because I feel obligated or because I pity you. I'm doing this because I want to. Because you deserve to know that you're valued. That you're seen. That those scars don't make you unworthy of affection or care or anything else." He paused, making sure she was really hearing him. "But only if you're okay with it. Your comfort matters more than their entertainment. So if you want to just leave right now, we can do that instead." Lyra stared at him. Searching his face for any sign of pity or obligation or disgust. Looking for proof that this was just another form of cruelty, more subtle but just as painful as Vera's direct attacks. She found none of those things. Just honesty. Just care. Just a human boy who'd somehow decided she was worth defending. "Okay," Lyra whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "Okay." Ryan stepped even closer. The crowd pressed in tighter, everyone trying to get the best view. Phones lifted higher. A few people in the back stood on chairs to see better. The silence was absolute. Even the background music at the festival had been turned down. Everyone was watching. Waiting. Ryan gently cupped Lyra's face in his hands. His palms were warm against her skin. One hand on the scarred side of her face, one on the unscarred. Treating both sides exactly the same. The touch was careful. Tender. Not hesitant or reluctant. Just gentle. Lyra's eyes widened. No one had touched her scars voluntarily in 3 years. Most people avoided even looking directly at them. But Ryan's hand rested against the damaged tissue like it was no different from any other part of her face. The crowd held its breath. Ryan leaned forward slowly. Not rushing. Not performing for the audience. Moving with clear intention but also giving Lyra every opportunity to change her mind and pull away if she wanted. He kissed her forehead first. A gentle press of lips against skin. Then he moved down and kissed her right cheek. The unscarred side. Then her left cheek. Where the scars were deepest. Then her jawline. Then the scars on her neck that she always tried to hide with her hair. Each kiss was the same. Gentle. Reverent. Not recoiling from the damaged tissue. Not rushing through to get it over with. Just kissing her the way someone kisses a person they care about. Lyra's glow, which had dimmed almost to darkness, suddenly blazed bright. Brighter than it had been in 3 years. The colors shifted rapidly through shock, joy, disbelief, overwhelming emotion. Patterns cascaded across her skin in waves. Her bioluminescence was reacting to feelings she didn't even have names for. Tears started streaming down her face. Glowing tears that left trails of light on her cheeks. Her hands came up and gripped Ryan's shirt like she was afraid this moment might disappear if she didn't hold on to something solid. Ryan pulled back slightly. Met her eyes. Asked a question without words. Lyra nodded. Barely. Just the tiniest movement of her head. But it was permission. Ryan kissed her lips. Not for show. Not to prove a point to Vera or the crowd. Just because in this moment, it felt like the right thing to do. The honest thing to do. The kiss was sweet. Gentle. Brief. But real. When they separated, Lyra was glowing so brightly she was almost hard to look at directly. Her colors were shifting through every shade of joy and surprise and happiness. She was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. Her glow was lighting up the entire area around them. The crowd was completely silent. Shocked into stillness. Phones continued recording, but nobody was laughing now. Nobody was making cruel comments. Then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, someone started clapping. Slowly at first. Then faster. Then another person joined. Then another. Not everyone. Many of the Lumini students looked scandalized. Disgusted. Vera's entire friend group stood frozen in shock. But enough people were clapping. Enough to show that opinion wasn't as universal as Vera had assumed. Enough to prove that some students, at least, saw what had really just happened. A human boy had looked at a scarred alien girl and seen someone worth kissing. Not out of pity. Not out of obligation. Not to prove a point. Just because she mattered to him. Vera's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock. Anger. Confusion. Fear. For the first time in her life at Celestia Academy, her social weapon had failed. She tried to humiliate Lyra and ended up looking cruel instead. She tried to expose Ryan as a fake and ended up proving he was genuine instead. Her power had been based on everyone agreeing with her judgments. On social consensus that her standards were correct. But Ryan had just challenged those standards publicly, and some people had actually agreed with him. The foundation of her dominance had just cracked. Vera opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. No words came out. She had no response. No comeback. No way to spin this back in her favor. Finally, she just turned and walked away, her friend group trailing behind her. Murmuring to each other. Trying to process what had just happened. The crowd slowly began to disperse. Still talking. Still recording. But moving on to other parts of the festival. Leaving Ryan and Lyra standing in a bubble of relative quiet amid the chaos. Lyra was still glowing brightly. Still crying. Still holding onto Ryan's shirt like a lifeline. I can't believe you just did that, she whispered. I can't believe it took me this long, Ryan replied. They stood there for a moment longer. Then, hand in hand, they left the festival together. Walking through corridors that were already buzzing with whispered conversations about what had just happened. Behind them, the footage was already spreading. Being shared. Being discussed. By tomorrow, the entire station would know. But for now, in this moment, they just walked. Two people from different worlds who'd found something genuine in a place that valued all the wrong things. And somewhere in the crowd they'd left behind, other students with scars or differences or reasons to feel like outcasts watched them go. And maybe, just maybe, felt a tiny bit of hope that things could be different. That kindness was possible. That acceptance was real. That the cruelest voices weren't always the right ones. One moment. One choice. One kiss. It couldn't fix everything. But it was a start. The footage spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within an hour of the Unity Festival, the video was circulating through the station's internal networks. Students shared it. Posted it. Commented on it. By the next morning, it had jumped beyond Celestia Academy entirely, spreading through local space communication channels, reaching neighboring stations and colonies. Within 3 days, beings across multiple systems had seen the video of a human boy publicly kissing the scars of an alien girl who'd been mocked for them. Had watched Vera's challenge backfire spectacularly. Had seen Lyra's glow brighten from near darkness to blazing light. Had witnessed a genuine moment of affection that completely rejected the cruelty surrounding it. The reactions were intense and divided. Many Lumini were outraged. How dare a human presume to judge their cultural standards? How dare he suggest that their values, which had existed for thousands of years, were wrong? Lumini community leaders gave statements calling the incident a gross misunderstanding of their culture by a species too primitive to grasp the nuances of aesthetic philosophy. The human species has been part of the galactic community for barely a generation, one prominent Lumini cultural commentator said in a widely circulated interview. They lack the sophistication to understand that physical perfection among Lumini isn't shallow vanity. It's a core value that has shaped our entire civilization. For them to dismiss it shows their ignorance, not our flaw. But others saw it differently. Non-Lumini species, especially those with their own complicated relationships with physical appearance and beauty standards, watched the video and saw something else entirely. They saw arbitrary cruelty being challenged. They saw someone choosing compassion over social conformity. They saw a different way of looking at scars and trauma and survival. The comment sections under the videos were battlegrounds. Arguments raged in a dozen different languages. Some called Ryan a hero. Others called him an ignorant outsider. Some praised Lyra's courage. Others called her a traitor to her species. Lyra woke up the morning after the festival to find her message inbox completely flooded. Hundreds of messages. Maybe thousands. She was almost afraid to open them. The hate mail came first because she sorted by most recent, and those were the newest messages. Traitor. Disgrace to the Lumini people. You should be ashamed. You're making all of us look bad by accepting pity from a human. Some were worse. Threats. Suggestions that she should just end her own life if she hated Lumini culture so much. Detailed descriptions of how disgusting she was. Lyra's hands shook as she scrolled through them. Her glow dimmed. This was what she'd feared. That standing up, being visible, would just bring more hatred down on her head. That nothing would change except she'd have even more people telling her she was worthless. But then she found the other messages. The ones that had come in earlier, before the hate brigade had organized itself. Thank you for being visible, one message read. It was from another Lumini student at a different school. I have scars from an accident 3 years ago. I've been hiding ever since. Seeing you made me realize I don't have to. Another, my daughter has a genetic condition that affects her glow. We've been told to keep her out of public view. Your courage is giving us courage to fight that. Another, I'm Grundon, not Lumini, but I have prosthetics from a war injury. My own people treat me like I'm broken. Watching that human boy kiss your scars made me cry. Made me remember that maybe I'm not broken. Just different. Message after message. From Lumini with scars or birth defects or conditions that made them imperfect by their species standards. From members of other species with their own reasons for feeling like outcasts. From parents of children with differences who'd been struggling with how to help their kids navigate cruel social dynamics. All of them saying essentially the same thing. Thank you for showing that scars don't mean you're worthless. Thank you for being visible. Thank you for not hiding. Lyra read through the supportive messages with tears streaming down her face. Her glow shifted through emotions too complex to name. She thought she was alone. Thought she was the only one suffering. But these messages proved that there were others. So many others. All dealing with similar rejection. All feeling like they didn't belong. And somehow, her moment of vulnerability had given them hope. Ryan's experience was different but equally intense. The station's news service contacted him directly, requesting an interview. At first he wanted to refuse. This had never been about publicity or making a statement. It had just been about standing up for someone who mattered to him. But Jake and Nicole convinced him otherwise. You started something, Nicole said. Whether you meant to or not. If you don't explain yourself, other people will explain you. Badly. So Ryan agreed to the interview. He sat in a small studio on the station, facing a Valyrian journalist whose skin shimmered with barely contained curiosity. The cameras went live. The journalist asked the obvious first question, why did you do it? Why publicly challenge Lumini cultural standards? Ryan had thought about his answer carefully. I wasn't trying to challenge an entire culture. I was trying to stand up for one person who was being treated cruelly. But if the result is that people reconsider how they treat others with scars or differences, then yeah, maybe the challenge was needed. You told the crowd that humans honor scars, the journalist said. Can you explain what you meant? Ryan nodded. Where I come from, scars tell stories. They're evidence that you survived something difficult. That you're stronger than whatever tried to hurt you. We don't hide them or see them as shameful. We see them as part of who someone is. Part of what they've overcome. He leaned forward slightly. Lyra got her scars protecting her younger brother from an attacker with a knife. She literally put her body between him and danger. That's incredibly brave. That's heroic. But her own people rejected her for it because the evidence of her courage doesn't fit their beauty standards. That's wrong. I don't care how sophisticated the culture is. Rejecting someone for being a hero is just wrong. The interview clip went viral too. Spread through the same networks as the festival footage. And while it didn't change everyone's mind, it sparked genuine debate. Cultural commentators from multiple species weighed in. Some defended Lumini standards as valid cultural differences that outsiders shouldn't judge. Others argued that any cultural standard that causes harm to individuals should be questioned. The conversation spread to universities, government chambers, family dinner tables across dozens of worlds. At Celestia Academy itself, the administration could no longer ignore what had been happening. The viral footage had made the bullying visible to everyone. Parents were calling. Diplomatic representatives were asking questions. The Academy's reputation was at stake. An investigation was launched. Students were interviewed. Messages and social media posts were reviewed. The pattern of harassment became undeniable. Vera had been leading a systematic campaign of cruelty against Lyra for 3 years. Others had participated. Teachers had witnessed it and done nothing. Consequences came swiftly. Vera was suspended for 2 weeks and required to attend mandatory counseling sessions about empathy and respect for diversity. Her leadership position in the student council was revoked. Other students who'd participated in the bullying received lesser but still significant disciplinary actions. More importantly, the Academy implemented new policies. Mandatory training for all students on respecting differences. Clear consequences for harassment based on appearance or ability. A reporting system for bullying that actually protected victims instead of ignoring them. A counselor specifically designated to support students dealing with discrimination. It wasn't perfect. Policies on paper didn't instantly change hearts and minds. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that what had been happening was wrong. That it needed to stop. The social dynamics at the Academy shifted. Not completely. Not overnight. But noticeably. Other students with visible differences started being more visible themselves. A Theron student with a prosthetic arm stopped hiding it under long sleeves. A human student with severe acne stopped sitting alone. A Lumini with vitiligo that disrupted her glow pattern started coming to the cafeteria instead of eating in her room. They weren't suddenly popular. The cruelty didn't evaporate. But the absolute social dominance of people like Vera had cracked. The certainty that conforming to narrow standards was the only way to survive had been questioned. And in that crack, in that question, space opened up for different possibilities. Lyra found herself becoming an unintentional symbol. She hadn't asked for it. Hadn't wanted it. But students started approaching her in hallways. Thanking her. Telling her their own stories. Asking advice about how to deal with bullying or discrimination. I don't have answers, Lyra would say. I'm still figuring this out myself. But you're here, one young student told her. You're visible. You're not hiding anymore. That's an answer in itself. Ryan and Lyra's relationship became official. They were dating now, navigating the complexity of an interspecies relationship. It was complicated. Their biologies were different. Their cultures had different expectations. But they figured it out together. Some people still judged them. Still made comments about the human with low standards or the scarred Lumini who should be grateful anyone wanted her. But those voices mattered less now. Held less power. Because there were other voices too. Voices of support. Voices saying that love and respect mattered more than matching species or perfect appearance. 2 years passed. Ryan and Lyra were seniors now. The Academy was different. Not transformed into some perfect utopia. Still flawed. Still struggling with prejudices and social hierarchies. But better. Measurably better. More interspecies friendships existed. More students with differences felt comfortable being visible. The bullying hadn't disappeared but it had decreased. And when it did happen, more people spoke up against it instead of staying silent. Lyra was named valedictorian. Top of her graduating class. When the announcement was made, there was genuine applause. Not universal. Some students stayed silent or looked resentful. But enough applauded. Enough to show that achievement was being recognized over appearance. She stood before the assembled students, families, and faculty on graduation day. Her scars were clearly visible. She didn't hide them anymore. Didn't use her hair to cover them or position herself to minimize how much people could see. She just stood there as herself. Whole and imperfect and worthy. For a long time, Lyra began her speech, I believed that I didn't belong here. That my scars made me less than everyone else. That I should hide. Should apologize for existing. Should be grateful if anyone tolerated my presence. She paused, looking out at the crowd. At Ryan and Jake and Nicole sitting in the third row, grinning up at her. At other students she'd befriended over the past 2 years. At teachers who'd finally started taking bullying seriously. At her parents, who'd actually shown up for the first time in years, looking uncomfortable but present. But someone showed me a different perspective, Lyra continued. A human perspective, actually. The idea that scars aren't flaws to hide but stories to tell. That surviving trauma takes strength. That protecting others takes courage. That real worth comes from character and actions, not from meeting arbitrary standards of perfection. Her glow brightened as she spoke, confidence replacing old fear. We all have scars. Some are visible like mine. Others are hidden. But they're all part of our stories. Part of what makes us who we are. And none of them make us less worthy of respect. Of friendship. Of love. Of belonging. She looked directly at Vera, who sat in the audience looking distinctly uncomfortable. Some of you have learned that lesson. Others are still learning. But I hope that when you leave this academy and go out into the wider galaxy, you remember, the cruelest voices aren't always the right ones. The most popular opinions aren't always the most ethical. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is choose kindness even when everyone else is choosing cruelty. The speech ended to standing applause. Not everyone stood. But most did. It was enough. After the ceremony, Ryan and Lyra stood together on the observation deck where they'd first really talked. Looking out at the stars. Thinking about their futures. Ryan had been accepted to a prestigious university studying interspecies relations and cultural exchange. He wanted to continue building bridges between species. Wanted to help others see past their differences. Lyra had multiple job offers from Lumini organizations, prestigious positions with impressive titles and excellent pay. She turned them all down. Instead, she was starting a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting individuals with visible differences across all species. Advocacy. Resources. Community. Her scars, once a source of shame, had become her purpose. Her strength. We're going to be on different stations, Lyra said quietly. Different systems for a while. We'll make it work, Ryan replied. People manage long-distance relationships all the time. Human people or multi-species people? Lyra asked with a slight smile. Both, Ryan said. He took her hand. We figured out everything else. We can figure out this too. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching ships come and go from the station's docking ports. Each one heading somewhere different. Each one carrying people with their own stories. Thank you, Lyra said quietly. For seeing me that first day. For sitting with me when I was alone. For standing up when everyone else stayed quiet. Thank you for letting me, Ryan replied. For trusting me. For being brave enough to be visible. They'd changed things at Celestia Academy. Maybe not as much as they'd hoped. Maybe not permanently. But they'd planted seeds. Shown that different perspectives were possible. That kindness could challenge cruelty. That arbitrary standards could be questioned. 5 years later, those seeds had grown in ways neither of them could have predicted. The Unity Festival incident was now taught in cultural sensitivity courses across multiple species educational systems. The human perspective on scars had influenced several species to reconsider their approach to physical differences. Lumini culture hadn't transformed overnight, but conversations about beauty standards were happening that had never happened before. Other interspecies couples existed now who cited Ryan and Lyra as inspiration. Other students with differences spoke up instead of hiding, referencing their example. Small changes. Gradual shifts. But real. Lyra's nonprofit had grown into a multi-system organization with chapters on dozens of stations and planets. Thousands of people with scars, disabilities, disfigurements, and other visible differences had found community and support through the program she'd built. Ryan worked as a cultural liaison, helping different species understand each other. Navigate conflicts. Build connections. He specialized in challenging harmful cultural practices while still respecting cultural identity. It was delicate work, but he'd learned from experience that some challenges were necessary. They were still together. Still navigating the complexity of an interspecies relationship. Still dealing with occasional prejudice and judgment. But also still finding joy in each other's company. Still supporting each other's work. Still believing that love transcends species and scars and arbitrary standards. One day, Lyra returned to Celestia Academy as a guest speaker. She stood in the same auditorium where her scarred face had once been mockingly displayed on that massive screen. But this time she was invited. Honored. Asked to share her story with a new generation of students. After her speech, a young Lumini student approached her. The girl couldn't have been more than 14. She had burn scars covering half her face from an accident. Her eyes were filled with tears. I was going to leave the academy, the girl said. Her voice shook. I thought I didn't belong here. That everyone would hate me. But then I heard your story. About how you survived. How you stayed. How someone saw past your scars to who you really were. She paused, struggling with her emotions. It gave me hope. Made me think maybe I could stay too. Lyra hugged the girl gently. You belong here. Your scars don't define your worth. They're just part of your story. And your story is still being written. As Lyra walked out of the academy with Ryan, who'd come to support her speech, she reflected on how far she'd come. From the girl who wanted to be invisible to someone who helped others find visibility. From believing she was worthless to showing others their worth. From hiding her scars to making them her symbol of strength. It had started with cruelty. With mockery. With shame. But it had transformed because one person chose kindness when cruelty was easier. Because a human boy had looked at an alien girl and seen a person worth defending. Worth kissing. Worth loving. What are you thinking? Ryan asked as they walked. That the smallest moments sometimes create the biggest changes, Lyra said. That one choice can ripple outward in ways you never expect. The butterfly effect, Ryan said. Chaos theory. Small changes in initial conditions creating massive differences in outcomes. Humans have a concept for everything, Lyra laughed. We try, Ryan said. They looked back at Celestia Academy one more time. At students from dozens of species walking together through the corridors. Mixing. Talking. Learning. Not perfect. Still growing. But better than it had been. Because someone challenged the cruelty. Because someone showed that acceptance was possible. Because scars became stories instead of shame. And in that transformation, in that shift from hiding to visibility, hundreds of people found the courage to believe they were worthy. Just as they were. Scars and all. That was the real legacy. Not the viral video or the fame or the policy changes. Just the simple, profound message that everyone deserves to be seen. To be valued. To belong. No matter what scars they carry.